Boom, 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 boom. I had to make some noise. And we're back.
Welcome to the Private Sanctuary Podcast. I'm Alexander Agunas, the Everyman Gamer, and today I'm joined by not one, but two co-hosts. First is my friend turned blogger turned co-host, James Ballard, and second is a face that you all know and are familiar with, Mr. Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Hi.
James, you have a face.
I know. It's very exciting to finally reveal that I have a face, because I'm so worried that people think I'm just some, mannequin.
I mean, I understand that. So today our topic is a special one. We're going to do a class feature on our first of 6 occult classes from Occult Adventures. I have a copy of the book right here in case you haven't seen it. Now, I want to preface by saying I love this book. It's great. And today we're covering not the alphabetically first class, but I think an essential class for talking about the different options within the book, and that is the psychic. James, can you tell us a little bit about the psychic class?
Well, the psychic class is kind of the impetus of the occult book. I mean, it does psychic magic, and it's your full spellcasting class from the book.
If you've ever wanted to confuse a player, tell them that they're a psychic spellcaster casting psychic class spells. But before we get started talking about the psychic, James, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Usually when we bring people on the show, they tell us how they got started in role-playing games, and maybe people want to know why we brought you on. Although, seriously, people, if you don't know about No Direction and our great blogs, you need to go check them out now, please.
So I write Code Switch. I've been writing for a little over a year there. I try to overanalyze Pathfinder things and real world things, because there's a lot of cool overlap that you might not know if you weren't schooled in history, philosophy, mythology. So a lot of that comes up. As far as starting Pathfinder, I actually started Pathfinder about 2 years ago, as a way just to meet people as I got older, because, man, it's hard to make friends outside of school.
That's true. And guess what? I was there. It was great. We died in so many adventures together.
Yeah, I think I almost died that one. That was very close.
Yeah, that was Masters of the Fallen Fortress. Have you played that one, Perram?
No, I have not played that one.
Oh, it's a free RPG Day mod.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I've got them all. But it's every time that one is being run, it's usually because I have to bail that week, and we have our backup GM.
Yeah, that's a good one, because it's like, it was the original Evergreen, wasn't it?
Probably.
I think.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's older than Confirmation.
It is older than Confirmation, because Masters of the Fallen Fortress came out opposite of the Advanced Player's Guide.
Oh, so that means it's definitely older than First Steps, too, because that was a season 4,
Yep,
I think.
It's older
4
than
or
First
5.
Steps.
Wow, that's an ancient one. You should play it if you haven't tried it. So, Perram, what does when you think of the psychic, what edifice comes to your mind?
An edifice?
I think I used the right word.
I think of somebody with their fingers to their foreheads.
Like Jean Grey, Professor X?
Oh, yeah. Only on one side. You just got to do this.
Oh.
Yeah, and then you just project. Maybe you need your hand out, because you don't actually, but it just looks cool.
It does. It turns out that when you're a superhero, if you just sit here like this, it doesn't make for interesting comic book art. And publishers don't want to pay you for it. You have to be using your hands even though you don't need to. So why don't we get started with a brief discussion, not on the psychic itself, but on the concept of psychic magic, because James and I were talking at Pathfinder Society, what was it, a couple weeks ago, about how psychic magic is similar to arcane and divine, but really it has its own rules and people get them confused all the time.
Right, like every single time a psychic class shows up at my table.
Yeah. So actually, out of the 3 of us, James has the most experience with the psychic. So James, why don't you tell us a little bit about psychic magic?
Well, psychic magic is a magic. It comes from yourself as from the book. Alex, I think you told me a bigger lore thing where you like go through the ley lines of the collective consciousness of everything and pull power from that. But instead of regular arcane power or God gifting you, it's kind of you manifesting spirit or will. It does have components, just like regular spells. They provoke regularly like regular spells. The difference being your components are different. You don't have to worry about chanting incantations or waving your hands or going like this. You're more you're worried about thinking the right thing, like your teeth becoming long as if you were using Greater Magic Fang, or you're feeling angry as you cast a rage spell. So it's a little different.
This leads to some really gross topics because, like, some of the material components for spells are things like bat guano. So, like, if you want a fireball as a psychic spell, you need to concentrate really hard on bat guano in order to make that explosion. Like, in my experience, like, I think that's is that logic components or emotion components that does that?
That is thought components.
Thought components, right. And in my experience, like, thought components are like really cool and flavorful for like the actual like psychic magic spells that are in Occult Adventures. But when you start backwards applying it to like older spells, things are sometimes really weird.
Yeah. And there is a cool bit in psychic magic where the specific expensive material for a component does not always have to be fulfilled. They give the example in the rulebook that instead of getting 5,000 gold worth of diamond dust, a 5,000 gold wedding ring of some significance could be the expensive component that's used up in the spell.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really cool and flavorful. That's one of my favorite parts about psychic magic. I think later we'll probably talk more about some really cool psychic spells that the psychic gets, but for now we should probably dive into the psychic's vital statistics. So, Perram, do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
Okay, well, the Psychic class is a D6 clothy, which means that they have no armor proficiency, simple weapon proficiency, D6 hit dice. They have the worst BAB. They have good will saves, and 2+ int skills. Basically, they look a whole lot like a sorcerer.
Yeah, they do. Their skill list is actually pretty good, too. I'm always impressed because psychics get perception as a class skill, which I don't think many other 9th level spellcasters get that. And the fact that they get all knowledges on a spontaneous caster, I think, gives them a solid skill list. What's been your experience with the psychic skill list, James?
Oh, psychic skill list is fine. It fits pretty much everything you'd want from it. It's good. UMD's not there, which I always find weird, but because of how psychic magic works, you have to UMD anything that isn't a psychic wand or scroll anyway. So it just kind of further makes you want to use psychic spells and psychic effects.
Thankfully, PFS doesn't let us care about that. We can just do whatever we want.
Oh, you jerk-face PSS players, I say as a venture officer.
Yeah.
Oh, it's also worth noting they get every single social skill.
All of them? Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. I mean, I guess, like, if you can control minds and know what people are thinking, you probably know what to say to them. That makes sense. So, psychics have class features that are sort of broken up into, I want to say, like, 3 general categories, and you guys can agree or disagree with me. The first one is their discipline, which is sort of like how they channel their mystic powers and what source gives them their psychic energies. And so, like, they pick a discipline and they get powers at every so often in order to represent that growing mastery. Then they also get this thing called a Fenric pool, which gives them mental power, and they can spend that mental power either on their discipline abilities or on an upgrade to the Fenric pool called Fenric Amplifications, which basically let you throw points at a spell in order to make it better. And then after those two, the third category is sort of like generic mind spell-like abilities. Would you guys agree with those 3?
Yep.
Yeah. And, I mean, they're pretty cool. I mean, the disciplines are pretty much just your spell, what are those, bloodlines for a sorcerer?
Right.
And your Phrenic Amp points are just your Arcanist points. So you have a bloodline resource and a exhaustible resource pool. So you feel like you're really getting your money's worth when you play through it.
And
yeah,
also,
and Oh, go ahead, Perram.
The phrenic pull is also important because it plays to the heritage of the class that it's drawing from. For those of you who aren't aware, the occult classes are distinctly different from what psionics have traditionally been in Dungeons and Dragons. And the previous iterations of all the psychic classes in Dungeons and Dragons, which of course is the base model game that became Pathfinder, the psychics almost always had a point system, and as opposed to a spell slot system. So all their abilities were amplifiable and usable through this pool of psychic points that you kept using up. Now, Paizo have openly said throughout the years they did not like that system. They did not like how it worked. It made psychics seem more like superheroes. That's sort of how that feel goes with those. So when they made the occult classes, they wanted to have a very specific flavor. But the phrenic point pull is sort of their little bitty olive leaf back into the heritage of the psychic class that says, hey, we haven't completely forgotten about what this was supposed to be about for some of you guys.
Yeah, totally. It's actually, I always thought that was really funny because in my eyes, the PowerPoint mechanic sort of came back into Pathfinder through the psychic magic monster ability, where you get this like little pool of PowerPoints, and it's like, oh, I can spend them and use them to cast spells for my monster. But like that sort of mechanic is out of the player hands, definitely from all of the occult classes. So I think one of the ways that psychics really manage to like sort of show their stuff and like what it means to be their flavor of psychic is through their discipline. And I really like James's psychic in our PFS games that I sometimes on rare occasion get to play with him, because he's got in what is, in my opinion, one of like the top 3 coolest disciplines. James, can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite disciplines?
My favorite one is one that wasn't in the original core book for the occult. It came out in Occult Anthology, I believe it was, and that is pageantry, because it does something that you do not see done often, where you can trade action economy for effectiveness of spells.
Oh, that's the one in Heroes of the High Court, right?
That's it, Heroes of the High Court. Right. So you can spend a pool from your phrenic point to make a spell that's a standard action, take 1 round, but its DC and cast level increases by 2. This also means that on the next turn, with the link spell, you can do your other phrenic amps with it, because this ability is not a phrenic amplification.
That's really cool. Is that the one where like when you aid other people, you get points back?
Yep. If you can hit over to 20 to aid another, you get your points back. Get 1.
Yeah. So that's another thing to talk about with the disciplines. Not all disciplines, but many of them have a mechanic built in that allows you to regenerate those points, which is something you usually don't see in a 9th level spellcasting class. In fact, I'd say the only one you really see it in, which James mentioned is a strong influence for the psychic, it's the Arcanist, because they can consume magic items and spell slots to regain points. Yeah, they just take that spell book. There's another one? Excuse me while I eat this imaginary spell book while you talk.
The other one is the Gun Mage from Ultimate Combat.
Oh, the Spell Slinger.
Yeah.
Nobody ever lets me play that.
Yeah, well, because they get the grit pull, so you regenerate that by showing off and or popping dudes.
I tried really hard in our Carrion Crown game to let our GM let me play a Spell Slinger wizard that had a double hackbutt on a cart, but he wouldn't let me do that.
No. Rob said no to that.
He let me play a Magus instead. Oh, that's so much less broken.
I mean, I'm sure he thought that until the first time you critically hit something for 92 points of damage.
Oh, man.
At level like 5.
And for our uninformed listeners, the Spellslinger is probably one of the least powerful options you could possibly take as a wizard.
Yeah, it really isn't. I think the only thing that holds it back in PFS, at least, is the fact that it doesn't have gunsmithing, so like it doesn't fit into their rules for buying guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the gun that I would want to use is Society Illegal, as I believe the archetype is.
Yeah, exactly. So, since we were originally talking about disciplines, that's okay. We're all over the place today. We've clearly been mind blasted. My favorite one is actually from Occult Origins. There's this really cool mystery called Reincarnation, And the reason I like it so much is it basically gives you bardic performance, or not bardic performance, bardic knowledge. You get this massive bonus on all these knowledge skills, and you're like, I am the psychic who knows everything. Yes, even that I know. Because, I mean, you're like an int-casting psychic who gets all knowledges as class skills and gets a scaling level bonus to your knowledges. Like, okay, Bard, you can go sit down. Someone can beat you at knowledges, Bard. What about you, Perram? Which disciplines have you looked at and thought were pretty cool?
Well, I like the Faith one because it sort of... Listen, the game is desperate for more healer-y, buffy, good options. And while that leans more towards the buffing, it at least does provide some form of psychic healing and enhances that aspect of it. And I really like the Dream one because there is so much fun to be had when you're messing in people's dreamscapes.
Oh, I know. James is going to see that soon in our next Strange Aeons book.
Oh, please stay out of my dreams.
No, nothing is sacred in Strange Aeons, especially your dreams.
There are two other disciplines that I think are really cool, and they both because they give you personal mindscapes. Sorrow gives you a personal fortress of sadness.
No.
And the one that you were talking about gives you your own library at 13th.
That's awesome. So I have a question for you. If you have the sorrow discipline and you go into your personal mindscape, does like Linkin Park start playing for every single psychic?
No, the lead singer's dead.
Oh.
You'd have to have the haunted discipline.
That was mean. Oh heavens. We're gonna need an atonement there, Perram.
No. But I'm already ahead of all you guys because I'm sitting here broadcasting from my personal fortress of sadness.
I mean, it's not a fortress of sadness once a week when everybody comes to get murdered in our Troso, right?
Oh, we're out of Atrosha. Which we will talk about when we don't have to talk about psychics.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
we
there's
always have to
18
talk about psychics.
Sorry,
Go
there are
ahead.
18 disciplines, so any psychic that you can think of, there's a discipline for.
Wait, there's 18 already?
Yep.
They
Wow.
love to add psychic disciplines in the player companion line.
This must make the psychic one of the most supported of like the post advanced player's guide. No, post ultimate magic classes. Because like you see a lot of content for the advanced class guide, the core, the magus, and then like you get to gunslinger, ninja, samurai, and it starts to taper off, and then you get to like the advanced class guide, and it's very hit or miss, and like nothing ever gets made for the vigilante, and occult stuff is generally rare, but psychics have 18 disciplines to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So like I'm really surprised that you didn't talk about the what was it, the aberration or the dark one, James?
Oh yeah, the abomination one. That's the one that my
Abomination.
psychic uses. Yeah, it's really fun and really damagey, and it works really well with the amnesiac archetype for the psychic, where you forget large portions of your memory as per a bunch of repressed memories. So you can kind of be like, "Ha, it's dark me there." There is a lack of regenerating points, and regenerating points is fun. So once you go into that abomination form, you're stuck in there. In fact, you have to make caster level checks to leave it. And I've lost half my rounds of that per day trying to get out of it.
Yeah, I've seen that. You're like, nope, I fail. Nope, I fail. Nope, I fail.
Nope, keep
I
leaving.
fail. Yeah, definitely. So, psychics also have another, let's call them choosable option, which is their Fenric amplifications. My big experience with the psychic is through the psychic detective investigator archetype, which gets psychic magic up to 6th level and gets 1 Fenric amp, a limited Fenric pool, and gets the ability to pick amplifications as talents, basically. So, like, that class isn't really great at using the Fenric amplifications, but I feel like there's a lot of really good ones for the core psychic.
Well, there's
a
a few like core ones that are just absolutely needed. One second. You need the one that Will of the Dead, so you can target undead. You need that almost is mandatory. And that's the one thing about psychic magic is that you'd think you'd have a problem being a psychic magic in a game where at least a third of the monsters are just completely immune to mind affecting effects, but they have Will of the Dead and other feats that just let them use their psychic abilities on things that don't even have brains.
I mean, I'm okay with that. What about you, James?
Season 6 says otherwise. Constructs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every time we do anything involving constructs, you're just like, well, I won't be playing this character today. Goodbye.
I run up and punch it because that's all I can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. But there's also some other really cool ones. One that I really like is, gosh, I think it's called Undercasting Focus. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Undercast Surge.
We're basically like, and I feel like undercasting is probably something that we're gonna need to talk about because it's one of like the defining features of psychic spellcasting. But basically, how it works is that psychic magic has spells that have levels in the same way that summon nature's ally or summon monster spells have levels. But if a spell is undercast, you can basically take the higher level spell, cast it using a lower level slot, and have it work as the lower level version of the spell instead of the original one. So James and I were joking about how it's not worded great in in Occult Adventures, but basically, like, let's say Mind Blast, or not, Mind Thrust 2, and man oh man, you're out of second level spell slots, and you really want to Mind Blast that guy. So since Mind Thrust 2, you can actually cast Mind Thrust 2 using a first level spell slot, immediately adjusting the spell to be Mind Thrust 1 instead. And so because of that, if you learn a higher level undercast spell than one that you already know, you get to trade the lower level one immediately for a free new spell. So it's a good way to cycle out spells that don't scale well while still keeping their power and getting something that's a little bit more useful. I think the undercast mechanic is brilliant. And this Fenric amplification basically lets you chuck points at a spell slot in order to make a lower level undercast spell that you cast work like a higher level one, even though you're using the lower level slot. So in my Mind Thrust example, you could know Mind Thrust 2, cast Mind Thrust 1 using a first level spell slot, but then chuck Fenric points at it in order to bump that first level the spell in a first level slot to a second level spell in a second level slot. And it's really expensive to do it, but when you're out of second level spells, it is a godsend.
Yeah, and that undercast mechanic is almost necessary because all the psychic classes only know a limited amount of spells. Like, there's not a lot of ways to learn new ones, so having the ability to just X out a lower version gives you more opportunity to go through the deep but shallow psychic spell list, although it's gotten better recently.
I'm sorry, Perram. There are no prepared spellcasters for you here.
Nope, none at all. That's the one broken part about psychics. It's the only disadvantage they have.
That's true. They have a really good spell list. It doesn't cover AoE damage and damage in general. No, that's not true. It doesn't cover AoE damage as well as Wizard and Sorcerer. But in my experience, Mind Thrust is probably the most effective damage dealing spell in the game.
Mm. Yeah, they do great single target damage. They are one of the most... They basically have access to the most powerful spells in the game as far as fatting opponents, because the most powerful version of any spellcaster or arcane spellcaster is the caster that shuts down an enemy because a worthless enemy or a removed enemy is, no threat at all to your party. So the best thing you can do is shut somebody down. It's good as killing them. And they have access to an infinite way of doing that to any particular enemy, as long as they have a brain. And sometimes when they don't, but not all the time when they don't. And they have a lot of class abilities that let them do that. They also aren't subject to a lot of the same restrictions that a more traditional spellcaster is with, such as somatic verbal or vocal components, which means that they can cast almost secretly, which is kind of hard to do. And also, they get to regenerate a lot of their points, so they last a lot longer than a traditional spellcaster, so they're not as subject to the 15-minute Avenger Day problem. They do have a couple of weaknesses. One is that their spells known is a limit, but there's some obvious winner choices, to the point that I find that a lot of psychic spellcasters are very samey, because there are a few obvious best options at each spell level. And because of that, they also... in addition to that problem, they don't do AoE damage very well. But if you look at your average Pathfinder published adventure, you're almost always fighting one-off monsters or a bunch of people that are so weak they don't matter. Because the way that Pathfinder handles group combats and experience awards, and Paizo's affinity for writing adventures where you're in very tiny rooms with one single person to fight. So being able to do great amount of damage or shut down one person is one of the best options you can have in the game. So of all the possible spellcasters, Psychic is probably the most powerful.
Yeah, you kind of have to build encounters to make the psychic spellcaster like grit their teeth a little bit. I actually think PFS is pretty good at that, though. Like they throw in a good variety of fights and a good mix of like single target and AoE stuff where like you're challenged. I definitely agree that like the adventure paths themselves are very hit or miss in whether a psychic would be effective.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I find part of the issue with their spellcasting list, at least before the most recent Psychic Anthology book came out, was most of their spells were save for a will save. So another spellcaster could kind of lock you out if their will save was high enough. So there's ways to boost it, but you were fighting against one save, and it's gotten better since. There have been more save for halves. There's been more things that go against other saves. It's gotten better, but there is some stuff where it's like, for 4 rounds, I've just tried and haven't done anything.
Yeah, and I think another problem that psychics often run into is that when you are trying to cast a spell, because of how psychic magic works, it's really easy to lock a psychic out completely. Like, logic components thought components and emotion components, they don't require hands, and they don't need to speak like a normal spellcaster does, but they have ways of being disrupted that are very mechanical, in the sense that if you ever need to make a concentration check and your spell needs a thought component, the DC is automatically +10. Like, concentration is a huge issue for psychics compared to wizards and sorcerers, who will inevitably get to a bonus so big that they can't fail. Also, emotion effects, if it's a negative emotion effect, it will automatically shut down your psychic if they are affected by it while they're trying to cast a spell, because they can't keep that like centered mentality that they need. And like, fear is an emotion effect, and everything has fear. And there are plenty of effects that are like, if you fail, you get panicked. If you pass, you're shaken. But shaken is still enough to lock you out of the ability to use many of your psychic powers. So it's almost like, don't bother throwing your die.
Heck, just an intimidation roll can shut down a psychic.
It's true. There are ways around it. I think that the Thought Shield spell is super useful for that reason, because if you're ever hit by something that would shut you out of your magic, you can throw the spell slot and protect yourself for a limited time.
Yeah, those are. I want to go through just one Phrenic Amp that I think is cool, that I think I overlooked the first time.
Okay.
And then we can go back to spells, because spells really are what makes a psychic, just like a wizard a wizard. Biokinetic Healing. It's not PFS legal, but it's in Occult Origins. When you cast a spell, the link spell, if it's from the Transmutation School, which there are a fair amount, you get hit points back. So if you do something that uses that, you get 2 hit points back per level of the link spell. So if you cast a 4th or 5th level transmutation spell, it's basically a lower level false life, which is a pretty cool bonus for one Phrenic point.
Yeah, and it scales really well too, especially as you get higher.
I mean, you're going to have really low hit points anyway, so a small hit point boost is everything.
Yeah. So I think most of the psychic spells are pretty self-explanatory, because there is a lot of overlap between the psychic and the sorcerer wizard list. But they have enough spells that are unique to the psychic that I think some of them are worth talking about. We've already mentioned Thought Shield, which is this really useful immediate action spell that basically lets you throw your spell out before someone does something to interrupt you or an ally's ability to basically think. It's against mind affecting things, and it'll suppress a bunch of negative effects while it's active. The duration depends on the level of spell. It's undercastable. And it is a great way to avoid being locked completely out of your magic in certain situations. I would say that spell, especially if you're playing in an adventure path like Carrying Crown or Strange Aeons, is probably mandatory for a Psychic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Psychic has a lot of immediate action spells, which I think is fun. A lot of them either raise AC as an immediate for a round, or raise your will save bonus. There is a very, very cool one that I think is either from Psychic Anthology or Heroes of the Darklands. It's called Anima Mine. So at the start of a day, you put a mine in your head that if anything uses a mind-affecting spell on you, it explodes and deals damage to them. Their spell still goes off, but they have to save for half, and it's like 1d6 per level.
Ooh. That's actually pretty good. That's like being tucked away in a fireball.
Mm-hmm. There's so much mental prep spells, which I think is cool.
Do you have to just constantly be thinking exploding runes, exploding runes, exploding runes?
you mentally inscribe "I prepared exploding runes today" on every cell of your brain, every thought wave.
Oh, and also, what is that? Ren Body, also from Anthology. Yeah. That we saw that used in our Reign of Winter game, and it was horrifying.
Oh, awesome. It was terrifying. Our Aldori Sword Lord had her leg ripped off.
It's like Elfin lied the spell. It's just and then you're in pieces.
Yeah, it was scary. They also have that's another thing with the Psychic list. Lots of body horror. Like a lot of their unique spells really screw you up. Like I had to save against Explode Head. Which basically does psychic damage, and if it does enough to kill you, your head explodes and generates an AoE effect targeted on you. That the fragments of your skull explode out and stab everybody like shrapnel. It is again a gruesome spell. So like the Psychic is a fun class, but it is also a very dark class. It makes the Abomination discipline very much warranted. You could be a terrible person.
And we also haven't talked yet about the not PFS legal, but game-defining spell, Psychic Combat.
Yeah. So Anthony and I did a sort of like a Private Sanctuary guide on Psychic Duels, and Instigate Psychic Duel basically starts that entire rule system. It's one spell that if you cast it, they have to do everything. And I actually did a slightly modified version of the Psychic combat rules for Strange Aeons at one point, and it's very trippy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a good use of modifying it, because whenever I read that spell, I just read, this is a spell that I use when I want to make everybody else at the table groan.
Yeah.
It's also...
You know what? Go ahead.
Okay, it's also a win-win situation, because, even if you are doing the dueling psychic stuff, your target is just now completely helpless while you two duel it out and surrounded by your allies.
True. Yeah. There's nothing stopping you from just getting murdered while you use it. So when I see that spell, James, I'm reminded of, what is it? The Infernal Champion spell that our friend Olivia tried to cast in Strange Aeons as a combat spell. Yeah. So like there's this wizard sorcerer spell. It might be cleric too. It's in Path of the Hell Knight. It basically summons a devil for someone to fight as part of their initiation to be a Hell Knight. And our friend Olivia tried to cast this as like a spell to summon the guy. She's like, "You need to fight that person," and she pointed to a bad guy. I'm like, the spell isn't written great, but this seems like it's against the flavor of the spell. And not saying that like we're walking up to some random party and casting Psychic Duel on their enemy fighter isn't flavorful, but like to me, Instigate Psychic Duel is something that you cast when two psychics agree to it, and like this is how we're gonna duke it out. Like it's not a spell you use in any combat. It's a spell that you have for cinematic things, and I almost wish that it wasn't a spell, that it was just something that people could do. Like you walk up to someone and is like, "I have psychic power. I'm gonna Psychic Duel you."
You like Yu-Gi-Oh!
That would be great if we had that nice agreement, but that's not how it's written. It's written that you can absolutely throw it out in the middle of the combat on the fighter that's going to fail, and then is also going to be absolutely horrible, and then you're going to kill him.
Oh yeah, well what I'm saying is like I think that it shouldn't have been a spell. It should have just been like these people engage in psychic duels and someone needs to be a psychic in order to initiate it or like have the psychic sensitivity feat. I think that would have worked a little bit better and not have turned it into a save or die spell because that's basically what it is now.
I mean, it's hold person, it sounds like, just with a higher spell level.
Yeah, it's hold person, it's just got a higher spell level and you're held too.
And there's rules.
Yeah. Oh, and there's like, yeah, you're right. There's like 4 pages of crazy rules.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but so I like the psychic spell list in general though, and I think it's good. And the Fenric apps are cool. Do they upgrade into major amplifications later, like a separate
at 10th
list?
level, and then that includes then they stop acting like sort of meta magic abilities and can actually act as meta magic abilities.
Woo! Meta magic for points.
Yeah, some of them allow you to do like lower level spells at the same time as higher level spells. A lot of them are like one of them lets you do teleporting whenever you cast a spell. So if you cast a 5th level spell, you move 50 feet that way behind a wall because you're a jerk.
The world is literally your oyster.
And there's also some other fun ones. You can, from the lower level list, you can summon a suit of psychic armor with a phrenic amplification or a few other ways. If you wanted to just like flavor it up instead of just going for the most broken options.
Yes. I mean, honestly, I found the psychic list wasn't super, like the amps weren't super broken. I felt like a lot of the power of the class comes from your spell pick with like most 9th levels.
It's like Wizard. He doesn't need feats or class abilities. He's just broken because he can cast 9th level arcane spells.
That's true.
And psychic spells are great.
And rounding out the psychic class, you have a whole bunch of spell-like abilities that work for like rounds or uses per day. They're things like Mind Link and Discerning Lies. They're very flavorful. They help the psychic feel like a psychic, and I'm pretty sure like one of them is like you gain Discern Lies. If you already knew the spell, you can retrain it for free, which is nice. Yep. It's kind of like saying, yo, we want you to have this. This is something you should have to meet your flavor. But if you already took it because you knew it was flavorful, we're not going to penalize you for it, which is nice.
Yeah.
So I think that about covers the basics of the class. Do you guys want to talk about archetypes quickly?
Oh, sure.
There are, I think, only 5 or 6 archetypes here for the psychic. They haven't done a lot.
No.
They suffer from 9th level caster syndrome, which is I don't get archetypes.
I mean, the wizard has a fair amount.
You've got probably one of the most complicated archetypes I've ever seen, the Amnesiac.
So, I have thoughts about the Amnesiac.
Oh, I know you do. Your PFS one is one.
Right. So, Amnesiac is really cool at low levels when you have spell slots, but as you learn spells slower, the ability that you get from Amnesiac is less of a factor in your gameplay. So, Amnesiacs have the ability for half their spell slots to just have them kind of open. They remember what they did last day, but they can roll to remember new spells to change up their list, which is really cool. And at low levels, because you have all those low-level slots, you can use this ability frequently. At 10th level, I have 2 of those slots between 4th and 5th level, and I can't really change them.
That's very sad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was cool when it was low level. I just don't see in the future it keeping up with that coolness because it only affects your 2 highest spell levels.
That is a little bit weird. But was it fun at low levels?
Right, and it makes sense. You don't want 7th level spells just being traded out per day. Oh, I know I need a limited wish this day. Roll a dice, oh, I need this. It makes sense.
So isn't that the archetype that your GM can accidentally take away from you?
Yeah, and I have to keep telling people to stop telling people my backstory unless you actually want to, because you're going to have to make me rewrite my character sheet.
Yeah. So basically, the Amnesiac has something that they can't remember about their past, and if they ever learned that thing, they automatically lose the archetype and have to be a regular psychic.
And it's cool, and it's something that I think you could impose on a player who is a psychic without it being too onerous.
Yeah, super sweet. So, I mean, in my opinion, that's probably the most unique of the archetypes. Would you guys agree?
It's definitely the most unique. The other 3 are Formless Adept, which is if you want to quit caring about physical threats, it's a great one because it has the class ability to a number of rounds, then become minutes per day. You choose various versions of I don't care about melee attacks. And then there's Psychic Duelist, which basically takes the Psychic Duels and amps you up even further on it. But you're already the most powerful class at Psychic Dueling anyway, so it
just makes you unstoppable. Yeah.
And then there is...
I really like... go ahead.
The creepy one.
Oh,
Mutation
about
Mind.
I love the Mutation Mind. That's so creepy and funny. Also horrifying, but mostly creepy and funny.
Yeah, you just completely mutate your body and get really crazy traits and body horror all over the place.
Yeah, you just Kafka. You just Kafka out until you win the encounter.
Yeah, it's a really great archetype if you don't care about tanking your saving throws for spells, because you have to take a penalty to intelligence. But in exchange, you get an enhancement bonus to strength at level 1, which is like, oh, okay, I guess I'm wearing this +4 belt now. And then at 12th level, it bumps up to level 6. It only lasts minutes per day, but it's super cool. And you also get, instead of Fenric amplifications, you can pick body horrors. They're called body mutations. You can get things like a bite attack, bulging eyes, long fingers, elongated legs, energy resistance. It's a weird little archetype because it almost seems like it wants you to play the Psychic as a melee class, and this is something that a couple of different options the Psychic has. Like, the Psychic has a Fenric amplification that basically, whenever you cast a spell with a range of touch, you can essentially spell strike that spell like a Magus, but the attack has to be an unarmed strike. So there are a lot of different ways to try to build this. I haven't seen someone try to do a melee Psychic and pull it off in a way that I think would be super effective, but I'm almost curious now. Maybe I'll try to do it myself.
Well, you could go the self-perfection discipline, or you could go the Rivethin, which is another body modification one, but it's kind of the equivalent to the sorcerer's what is that? They have like a duelist or puncher.
The mutagenic mauler, the one that basically makes you a mongrel man and you get martial flexibility.
Yeah, they call it like the sorcerer puncher or something. I forget what it has a cool name.
Let's call it the sorcerer puncher. The only thing they're good at is punching sorcerers. Boom. They're like the Mega Me of spellcasters. They're like, I can only do one thing once per day, and it's punch that sorcerer in the face.
It's really easy, and it's also really funny. I don't see a loss here.
I agree. I challenge Perram to make one for PFS.
No.
Go.
No. I GM anyway. What am I gonna make?
You didn't get absorbed in our funnies though, our lulls?
I have all kinds of funs with the lulls. But it stops at me building characters to play on the once a year I get to actually play one.
Oh. Well, I guess we could talk about the Psychic Marauder, which isn't PFS legal yet.
It looks like an archetype that's kind of the sadness one, where instead of an aura of sadness that makes everybody depressed on you, it's an aura of insanity around you that makes everybody else insane.
I mean, if I was a Psychic, making people insane would be tempting.
Yeah, and eventually they become immune to insane, and it's kind of like a furthering of the aberration, kind of like an aberration bloodline style archetype. It's kind of like the Black Blood of Orb Oracle, where it's the Darklands have somehow made you weird beyond all comprehension, and this is how it manifests.
I mean, I'm already weird beyond all comprehension, but I appreciate the Darklands for trying.
Oh, you don't have nearly enough tentacles to compete down there.
That's true.
Can I go ahead as a side note and appreciate that when Paizo decided that it wanted to do its Underdark, it decided that no, we're not going to base it on spiders. We're just going to go full on Cthulhu down there.
It's a good choice.
The darker you go, the more tentacles you find.
Ooh. And really, the stronger things just have thicker tentacles.
That's true. Or they're Gugs and they have tentacles where their face parts should be.
Yeah, or they're Seguthi or whatever, and they fight into like devourers.
Yeah, it's almost like in Moana where like she goes down and like the 5 things just eat each other.
Yeah, it's basically just an Isle of Dr. Monroe, but instead of it being like animals, it's just things that you left in a like radioactive hellscape, and they've come together, and nature will win.
Yes. So before we wrap up talking about the Psychics class features and archetypes and stuff, the one thing we didn't talk about, Psychics actually have a weird alternate rule system from Occult Realms called Psi-Tech Discoveries. They are basically Fenric amplifications that you can choose in place of Fenric amplification or feat, and they're all based around technology. So, like, if you want to use the technology guide rules, they're cool. It's something that no other class has. A lot of them are fun and interesting. Like, one of them lets you upload your brain into a robot as if you were an artificial intelligence.
Yeah, they're like Wizard Arcane Discoveries.
Yeah.
They take the place of a feat or an amplification. But, I mean, a fair amount of them are also society legal, which is cool. And, I mean, there's things like Force Field, Laser Blast, Psychic Battery. Yeah, they're cool.
I just said, like, if you ever play Iron Gods, like, I feel like a psychic with a lot of those is something you should consider.
Drink a bunch of strange fluids, trip balls, it'll be good.
It'll be good. Multi-class Alchemist Psychic. I can't promise you'll be useful, but man, oh man, you'll be the most Fallout character ever. Oh, right. So, that's the basics of the Psychic class. Do you guys have any other thoughts on it? Oh, I know.
My main problem with the Psychic is, first, I really love the Psychic, okay? I love it, love it, love it. But my main problem with the Psychic is you have very little variation on your character theme overall. Because even though it has, we've listed 1,000 different options it has with 18 different disciplines, you're still the creepy person that messes with people's minds, and I wish it had more. I wish it was easier to make a melee psychic or a completely different build or a pure hilly psychic. But that is the one thing I wish it had, is more versatility. But at the same time, what it does do, it does incredibly well. And I know when they were putting this out, Paizo was on this big, constantly talking about how important it was, the class fantasy. The class fantasy has to be fulfilled. It probably fulfills the class fantasy better than any other class I've seen.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun from top to bottom. You do weird things. You get occult skill unlocks, which, if you actually look in them, are pretty fun if you have the time to do them. Like the one with Appraise makes you kind of be able to look into the history of objects, kind of like a limited legend lore. There's a lot of fun stuff here. I do wish there was more ability to use less mind-affecting, but still perception-based magics. Their utility in illusions, I think, is low. Because every illusion that they do, like oniric horror, is still an enchantment mind-affecting. Mm-hmm. So that's affecting somebody else by changing their perception rather than making something that's just inherently believable, which I think should be within a psychic's grasp.
I also kind of wish they had more telekinesis style things where, like, they're using their mind to affect objects and creatures, and I feel like there's a really good one in Occult Anthology. Like, I think it's Ren Body, where you pick someone up and you rip them apart with your brain. And, like, I wish they had more spells that, like, targeted reflex and will save using this idea that a psychic can just affect the things around them with their mind and move them and make them do stuff. Like, if you can control the brain, you can control the world, sure, but, like, pick up that box and drop it on the fighter and laugh because he has no reflex. Or, you know, use your brain to, like, shred that rogue's internal organs and laugh because you're apparently a psychopath now.
Yeah, man.
I'd love the ability to just, like, trip people by making the floorboards rip out from underneath them.
So, in my experience, the tricky thing with that is there are spells that do that, like Thunderclap, but are you really going to want to spend one spell slot to do one trip attempt most of the time?
If it's a first level spell slot.
Well, yeah, Barb Chains.
Yeah.
Oh, man, okay, that didn't work. All right, guys, sorry. I thought I had a good point. I didn't.
No, you're right. Thunderclap is a worse, or Thunderstomp is a worse version of Barb Chains, basically.
Yeah.
And the trip condition is actually fairly fun, but if you use it strategically, because not only does it take actions away from them, it immobilizes them halfway because they're going to have to spend at least one move action to stand up, but also you only want to trip people when they're next to your friendly melee, so then you're giving your friends free attacks on the target, which in itself can be devastating. I mean, my two-handed fighter barbarian is going to do a lot more damage than any spell I've got, so if I can give him a free attack and cause the enemy to have to waste his actions getting up, great!
Yeah, that's a good win. You just need some persistent stumble gaps.
No, not stumble gaps. No! I I scream no because in Carrying Crown, our friend loved Stumble Gap, and he would put Stumble Gap on the ground, but like not mark the place he put it. So people would walk over the Stumble Gap all the time. And the GM would be like, "You just walked over Stumble Gap." They're like, "No!" Like, what book was it where we finally got smart and gave him pogs to put down or whatever?
It's all been a blur, man. I just remember hitting things with Spell Strike, and then they were gone, and then I died or something.
No, I remember very clearly that you like destroyed swords and threw them at people.
Oh, that was so cool.
There's a spell called Storm of Blades where like you use a sword as a material component, and then it conjures like 8 spectral copies of that sword, and you just throw them at people like 30 feet.
And telekinetic projectile. I had a quiver of Falcatas. Very fun.
So this is hands down the most anime class of all of them, right?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the Magus right there, but
sorry.
The Magus is very anime.
Yeah, I would go probably the Kineticist if you're going for psychic classes. That's probably your most anime.
I agree with that. You can make a strong Goku out of the Kineticist.
Yeah, I just want to be great at punching.
I mean, yeah, that's wow. You know, in a single sentence, you just destroyed that.
No, I've got a Earth Kineticist. I don't know the archetype in their PFS games that is very good at punching.
Is it the Elemental Ascetic, the monk one?
Probably.
Oh gosh, God bless that poor monk player. You have my condolences, sir. So, we're a little bit over the time we wanted. You guys have time for some good old-fashioned Reign of Winter banter?
Sure, I probably have about 5 minutes.
Okay, let's do some quick banter and then we'll wrap this up. So, as many of you know, James and I are in the same Reign of Winter group, and we just beat Book 5. Rasputin must die, and he did. It's like the Ron Howard of narrations.
Now I'm gonna have to warn my players to not listen to this episode.
Oh, we won't give major spoilers, but
you just did.
Yeah.
But it's called Rasputin must
Yeah,
die.
and for some reason I've lucked into 3 players who have not known that yet, and I've sworn my other 2 to secrecy.
It's like the worst kept. It is
absolutely the worst kept secret in past history.
It's like a worse kept secret than the fact that that Rezmir isn't actually a god.
Yeah. I mean, it was ruined for me when I played Gunslinger, because I'm like, what are these cool, like, Russian weapons? Well,
that's how it got... and remember, that's how it got spoiled initially. It was not because they announced the title. It was because the item cards came out, and one of the item cards was Tank.
Yeah. Well, there's a spoiler there. The tanks aren't an item. You can't put them in your pocket.
No. Oh, I'm trying, guys. It just won't fit.
The bag
My
of holding,
players
it
will
just won't
find
go
a
over.
way. They will like some weird shrinking spells and...
Shrink items clutch.
You know what? You can just tell your players that the second we start the banter, they have to turn this off.
Gotcha.
Just
And
overlay screeching.
You can give them a special version of the file that has just like someone yodeling instead, and no one will want to listen.
Yeah. How's your Reign of Winter going, Perram?
Well, they just beat Book 3, and they're starting Book 4, and so we're in full spoiler mode right now, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, guys. Yeah, okay, guys. Sorry for some spoilers, but they exited. I got to pull a cool whammy on them, where that the next form of the hut is the garden, but they thought the gazebo was the hut, and they were exploring this weird painted world, and they're like, "This is a weird dimension," and they've been searching the garden for keys the entire time. It's like, we got to find something in here that's the key. So when they I had a really fun fight with my whole last session, all 4 hours of it, was just the fight in the cabin to get out because of the Moon Beast tag teaming with the Denizen of Ling. But when they had the final reveal,
scary one.
where they went up the chimney and then got to see out the windows, and they realized they weren't still in the hut, that was a great little, oh my gosh, we're still in the hut moment. And I was like, well, yeah. And then I got to use the Sirenscape because one of them walked outside, and the encounter that happens there. So I got to use the Sirenscape Jurassic Park Dragon Roar button. But that fight was brutal. The fight with the Moon Beast. I bet, I have to admit, I was crueler to my players than that fight was meant to be.
That's
Why
okay.
would you be that way?
because what I did with it is I read the tactics that they wanted me to use, and realized that my players would not enjoy that with the rubies and all that jazz and the fake out. And also they have been very, very loud at this point. Very, very loud. So what I did with the fight was have the Moon Beast and the Denizen of Ling sit at either side of the two doors on the right and left. Already decided, hey, we're just going to jump these fools, and any of the survivors are going to make great slaves. And then they used Major Image to make the hallway look like the doors were at the other end of the hallway, to get them all to walk all the way through the hallway and string themselves out. And they also imagined that the doors to the other hallway were locked, so they wasted some actions. And then they began to cast some fun spells, like Confusion on the entire party, and then Dominate Person. And basically the fight, they didn't find out until the fight was halfway over that there were monsters involved, and they weren't just fighting each other for fun.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
That's the best kind of story. You know, like, Reign of Winter has a lot of brutal moments, but overall it's been really fun.
Mm-hmm. And it is so brutal.
Oh,
if you can survive book 3, man, like that is your crux. Like, if you can get over that, like, you have a real chance of winning the AP. Like, it's not a great chance.
Yeah, book 3 permanently killed 2 characters.
I believe that.
I almost permanently died, but I was dead when I went down the pit.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. You would have been permanently dead. We had Casey died there. A beloved NPC friend died there and had to get reincarnated.
oh yeah, she hates that. That's cool.
Yeah, she hates it. She doesn't like being the thing she turned into. Yeah, but so totally fun. I'm doing Strange Aeons. James has died for the second time.
I just die a lot. I've died 3 times in Reign of Winter. I just die. It's fine.
I'm sorry, like that fight was really rough, but I wanted it to be super cool because it was tied into your and Paul's backstories.
It was fun.
Yes, that's all I need. And then so I got roped into starting Hell's Rebels.
Ooh, that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I actually just got all the books in today. I had a friend who was giving them to me so that I could run it. And wow, I said to her, I was like, you know, like, I feel like PR must have undersold this because, like, I remember hearing about this and Hell's Rebels didn't really sound all that cool. But then, like, I'm reading through the books and the stories and, like, the things that, like, happen. And it's like, what? Wait, why? This person is involved and it does this? And, like, this is the final fight of this. Oh, this is really cool. And, yeah, I'm really excited to run this adventure path now.
Yeah. It seems to be the more well-received of the 2 Hell's adventure paths.
I want to play Hell's Vengeance so bad. I want to be a jerk. Worship Mammon, man. Maybe a Cavalier of Mammon.
I want James's next adventure path to be Jade Regent, though.
I am probably running Jade Regent or the Shattered Suns or whatever the Starfinder is once we're done Reign of Winter. So,
yeah.
I mean, I did just TPK my Skulls and Shackles party, so good luck, guys.
Yeah.
My PCs lately have been accusing me of trying to clear the way for Starfinder with every hard fight that's been happening.
Well, you
Just
know,
show them the book.
Rogue Genius Games is coming out with a third-party supplement. Wait. So maybe if they're worried about playing Starfinder and want some familiar classes and races, wink, they could pick up the Starfarer's Companion, wink.
The art for that was really dope.
Yeah.
Yeah, the front cover Owen got is like, I was like, I messaged him, I was like, is that really our cover? Like, he's like, yeah, it's work in progress. And I'm like, it gets better?
We have to legally say this sentence. Alex is partially in ownership and writing for this, or is Everyman not attached to this?
It's a Rogue Genius Games product. I wrote half of it as a freelancer for Rogue Genius Games, and my company's logo might be on it. I don't remember what Owen and I agreed on.
The 2 things we have to legally disclose is, did you work on it, and do you have ownership of the company? And it sounds like maybe or no. Good. Okay. So I'm sorry, guys. It's just the FCC. The FCC makes us say these things.
I mean, they don't make me say these things, but if they don't, I'll get in trouble. So yes, they kind of make me. That's actually the legal definition of make me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh well.
Oh, let's get the FCC to worry about us. That'll be fun.
Oh, we would be making it big.
I know. When the FCC cares about that's Stephen Colbert territory.
Oh, they were
Like,
suing mommy bloggers. Do not think that they don't care.
oh,
Oh, wait. So I want an outro, but we need something happy. We can't end on suing.
Okay,
So
I have a
something
cool
happy.
idea, and I want
Okay.
your all's advice. My players' current characters that are acting as healers is a shaman and a witch. So their access
Okay.
to resurrection right now is reincarnate. But
Yeah.
but they're not on Galarian anymore. So what's a good idea for some weird alien critters for them to reincarnate as?
I mean, like, the obvious one is the PC race on there.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Triaxian. If you can find Ifrit, probably, because there might be
Yeah.
a salamander version.
And
Oh, do you know what-
Dragonkin.
Do you know what I would do? All right, I have three for you, Perram. Are you ready?
Okay.
You might like them. You might hate them. First one, Wyverns, the dragon things from
Oh,
the
wyverns. Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. They look like dragon kobolds. They're weird. They're exotic. They fit with all the dragons on Triaxis.
Mhm.
I don't think that's a spoiler because it's literally in Distant Worlds.
Mhm.
So there's tons of dragons there. Make them dragons. Number 2, kobolds. Same reason, but it's hilarious to make them play kobolds. I mean, James doesn't think so clearly, but I do.
Mm.
I think making your players come back as the scrappy, weak runlings would be really funny and mean, but I digress. Number 3, if I was feeling really creative, I would grab the race build rules from the Advanced Race Guide, and I would try to use them to build a 0-hit die, probably medium-sized, meaning younger version of the dragons that the dragon riders of Triaxis use. So like maybe they get reincarnated as a non-bonded version of one of them and have some of their powers, but they get reincarnated as youths instead of as adults. So they're medium instead of large, and you can let them take a feat or something to be large. That might be fun.
Oh, and also those wolf people.
The adlets, yeah. So those are actually CR10 creatures. They're actually super powerful. That's why I was like, when
Yeah, don't give them that. I mean, if you can 0-hit die that.
but
maybe atlet.
you could take the Rougarou from Bestiary 6, lose the change shape ability, give them something like wintry powers, like maybe something based on their racial traits, and use the Rougarou as a baseline in order to build adlets.
Ooh, okay.
So those would be my choices, especially because the adlets tie in really well.
Also, elves are everywhere, and maybe Lashunta.
I mean, yeah, if you wanted to do aliens, those are really good choices too.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps. Have people died?
Not yet. 'Cause they just now are stepping out of the hut. I ended it with the first person opening the hut. Then I did the scene. Okay, and a huge winged draconic shadow passes overhead. I hit the Sirenscape Dragon Roar button, and we'll be back next week.
Nice.
Yeah, the 4 elemental races would fit too. You could just make them Triaxian shaded.
Yeah, or you could do Dampier and say it was Triaxin instead.
Mm-hmm.
You could actually do a lot of those, like Skinwalker too. Just like, you're a Triaxian Skinwalker instead of a human Skinwalker. But so with that, I think this is a good place to stop today's episode. Thank you for joining us for episode 302 of the Private Sanctuary podcast, and special thanks for James Ballard for joining me on the show. I hope to have both you and Perram on more often. Perram gave up a lot of his time today in order to help us record live, and I greatly appreciate it as someone who wants to try to get the Private Sanctuary podcast back up and rolling. So until next time, I'm Alexander Agunas.
I'm James.
I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And you are always welcome in our Private Sanctuary. You guys are still moving.
I don't